Rain fell like bullets, and Ethan Carter stood in the doorway of a woman he barely knew.
I love our life
Watching
together.
a man with
Me
madness in
too.
his
It's
eyes
perfect.
decide whether to cross the
Just
line
like
from
you.
threat to violence.
Come here.
Because sometimes protecting your daughter means teaching her that good men don't look away. But that storm lay weeks ahead. This story begins on a Saturday morning in Tampa when the alarm on Ethan's phone went off at 5:47, 3 minutes before his usual time. He silenced it with the practiced motion of a man who hadn't needed an alarm in years, but set one anyway because routines were the architecture of survival, and he'd learned long ago that survival required redundancy. The apartment was silent. Emma was with his parents this weekend, an arrangement they'd settled into every third Saturday. His mother, Maureen, called it time to breathe. His father, Clayton, called it time to find a nice woman. Ethan called it what it was: 48 hours of profound emptiness, punctuated by too much coffee and the nagging sense that he'd forgotten something important. He lay in bed for exactly 90 seconds, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. The blades needed dusting. He added it to the mental list that never seemed to shrink, filed it somewhere between replace bathroom caulking and figure out what to do with the rest of your life. At 32, Ethan Carter had become an expert at maintenance, maintaining the apartment, maintaining his job, maintaining the careful equilibrium that kept his daughter fed, clothed, and blissfully unaware that her father sometimes sat in his car after dropping her off at school, hands shaking on the steering wheel, wondering if he was doing any of this right. He showered in water that was slightly too hot, a small rebellion against the thermometer he kept set to child-safe temperatures. The mirror showed him what it always showed: tired eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled at Emma, a jaw that needed shaving, shoulders that had learned to carry weight without complaint. Not handsome exactly, but solid, reliable, the kind of face that blended into crowds at parent-teacher conferences and grocery stores. That was fine. Ethan had stopped wanting to be noticed 4 years ago. By 6:15, he was dressed in jeans and a faded blue Henley, the unofficial uniform of weekend mornings. His work clothes hung in the closet like shed skins, pressed shirts, and khakis that transformed him into Ethan Carter, senior financial analyst at Bennett and Associates. A man with a title on his business cards in a parking spot with his name on it, and absolutely no one who would notice if he vanished tomorrow. Except Alexandra Bennett would notice. A treacherous voice whispered, "She notices everything." He pushed the thought away with the efficiency of long practice. Alexandra Bennett was his boss, his divorced, brilliant, unattainable boss. Thinking about her in any capacity other than professional was the kind of self-destructive fantasy he'd abandoned, along with staying out past 10 and eating cereal for dinner. Well, he still ate cereal for dinner sometimes, but only when Emma was with her grandparents. The coffee maker gurgled its familiar song as Ethan gathered his keys, wallet, and phone. The beach was calling. It had been calling for weeks, actually, a persistent tug at something deep in his chest that he'd been ignoring in favor of spreadsheets and soccer practices and making sure Emma's lunch contained at least 2 food groups. But today, with the apartment too quiet and the weekend stretching before him like an empty page, Ethan decided to answer. 4 years. It had been 4 years since Sienna happened. Then Emma happened, then Sienna unhappened in the most spectacular fashion possible. The memory surfaced unbidden as Ethan pulled onto the highway heading toward Clearwater. Sienna standing in their living room, suitcase already packed, Emma crying in her playpen. The words that came out of Sienna's mouth had been precise, surgical. "You gave me everything I thought I wanted. The marriage, the baby, the normal life. But I didn't actually want them. I just wanted to know I could have them. Now I know. I'm done." She'd walked out that afternoon. PhD program at Caltech 3 weeks later. Birthday cards that arrived late, if they arrived at all. Emma asking why mommy didn't come back, and Ethan having to explain that sometimes people make promises they can't keep, that it wasn't Emma's fault that mommy loved her, but loved something else more. The lie tasted like ash, but what else could he say? Your mother is brilliant IQ, 156 Mensa, at 12 MIT graduate at 19, but being smart doesn't mean being kind. Being smart doesn't mean being capable of love. The drive to Clearwater took 45 minutes. Ethan spent it listening to a podcast about financial markets that he would later be unable to recall a single detail of, his mind already drifting towards salt air and the sound of waves. He'd grown up in Florida back when his parents' marriage was still intact, and summer meant endless days of sunburn and sand in his sheets. The beach had always been his reset button, his sanctuary, the place where the noise in his head finally went quiet. The parking lot was nearly empty when Ethan arrived just after 7:30. He left his shoes in the front seat and walked barefoot toward the water. The sand was cool between his toes, not yet heated by the Florida sun. The air tasted of salt and seaweed and something Ethan couldn't name but recognized instantly, freedom, the temporary kind that came with a countdown timer, but freedom nonetheless. He walked for nearly 20 minutes, staying close to the waterline, where the sand was firm and wet. A few joggers passed him going the opposite direction. A woman walked a golden retriever that reminded him of the dog he'd promised Emma they could get someday, knowing someday was code for when your father figures out how to keep a plant alive for more than a month. The beach curved around a rocky outcropping, creating a small cove that Ethan remembered from childhood. He and his brother used to hunt for shells there, competing to find the most unusual specimens, while their mother watched from a blanket, pretending to read, but really just watching them with that particular look mothers get when they're memorizing moments they know won't last. The memory hit him with unexpected force. Ethan had to stop walking, had to press his hand against his chest, where something had gone suddenly tight. His mother was fine. She was at home right now, probably making pancakes for Emma with too much syrup because grandparents were contractually obligated to spoil. His father was fine too, grumbling about something on the news while secretly savoring every minute of having a granddaughter to dote on. But the feeling didn't pass the strange melancholy weight of time moving forward, whether he wanted it to or not, of Emma growing up, of his own life slipping past in a blur of responsibility and survival. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't see her. The woman was standing at the edge of the water waves, lapping at her bare feet. She wore a simple sundress, pale yellow, and her dark hair was loose around her shoulders in a way that seemed almost shocking. He couldn't see her face from this angle, but something about her posture, rigid defense of wrong, made Ethan slow his steps. Then she turned and the world tilted sideways. Alexandra Bennett, his boss. His brilliant, terrifying, perpetually composed boss who wore power suits like armor and had once made a junior analyst cry with nothing but a raised eyebrow and a three-word email. She looked nothing like that woman now. Her face was pale, almost gray. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and even from 20 feet away, Ethan could see her hands shaking. She wasn't wearing makeup, which shouldn't have been notable, except that Alexandra Bennett always wore makeup, always looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread about women who had it all. This woman looked like she was barely holding herself together. Their eyes met, and Ethan watched recognition flicker across her face, followed immediately by something that looked almost like fear. Ethan. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the cracks in it, the places where control was paper thin. Ms. Bennett. The formal address felt ridiculous here, both of them barefoot in the sand, but Ethan didn't know what else to call her. Alexandra seemed too intimate. Boss seemed too absurd. It's Saturday, she said it like an accusation, like he'd violated some unspoken rule by existing in the same space as her, outside of office hours. It is. You're supposed to be. She trailed off, shaking her head. You have a daughter. Where's your daughter? With my parents. Ethan took a step closer, then stopped when he saw her flinch. Miss Bennett, you all right? The question hung in the air between them. Alexandra's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Ethan saw the woman he knew, the executive who'd built a company from the ground up, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated deals worth millions. That woman would have dismissed his concern with a wave of her hand and a cutting remark about boundaries. But that woman wasn't standing in front of him. No, the words seemed to cost her something. No, I'm not all right. What's wrong? She let out a laugh that had no humor in it. What isn't wrong? My ex-husband is... She stopped, pressing her lips together like she was physically holding words inside. So, never mind, this isn't your problem. Maybe not, but you're standing on a beach at 7 in the morning looking like you haven't slept in days. That seems like somebody's problem. Alexandra's eyes widened slightly and Ethan realized he'd surprised her. Good. Maybe he'd surprised himself too. 4 years of being invisible, of fading into the background, of being so careful all the time. And here he was, pushing into spaces he had no business entering. But Emma was safe. She was with his parents eating pancakes with too much syrup. And for once, Ethan didn't have to be careful. He didn't have to be invisible. He could just be a person who saw another person struggling and asked if they needed help. His name is Marcus, Alexandra said it quietly. My ex. We were married for 7 years. The divorce was final 18 months ago. I thought, she shook her head again. It doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong. Wrong about what Alexandra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked past Ethan toward the parking lot, and her whole body went rigid. He's
I
here.
love our life together.
Ethan turned.
Me
A
too.
man was
It's
walking
perfect.
toward them across
Just
the
like
sand,
you.
moving with the
Come
kind
here.
of purposeful stride that set off alarm bells in the face of the skull. He was tall, well-built, wearing expensive clothes that looked ridiculous at the beach. His face was handsome in a sharp way, with the kind of features that probably photographed well, but up close looked almost predatory. Alexandra. The man's voice carried across the sand, smooth and controlled. I've been looking for you. Marcus. Alexandra's voice was ice. What are you doing here? I wanted to talk. You've been avoiding my calls. I've been avoiding them because I have nothing to say to you. Then Marcus stopped about 10 feet away, his eyes moving from Alexandra to Ethan and back again. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, calculation. Then something darker. Who's this? Alexandra's hand found Ethan's arm, her fingers closing around his bicep with surprising strength. He could feel her trembling. This is my boyfriend. Her voice was steady, but Ethan felt her grip tighten a silent plea. Ethan. The lie landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Ethan had exactly 1 second to decide what to do with it. Every safe instinct he'd cultivated over 4 years screamed at him to step back, to apologize, to explain the misunderstanding. But he looked at Alexandra's face, pale and desperate, and trying so hard to be brave, and he made a different choice. Hey! Ethan shifted closer to Alexandra, let his arm curve around her waist in a gesture that looked natural, protective. His body moved before his brain caught up muscle memory from another life when his father Clayton had taught him, when someone's threatened you, don't step back, you step in. That's what men do. That's what fathers teach sons. You must be the ex. Marcus's eyes narrowed. The ex, is that what she told you? Didn't have to tell me much. The restraining order application kind of speaks for itself. He was guessing, hoping. Alexandra's sharp intake of breath told him he'd guessed right. There's no restraining order. But something in Marcus's voice had shifted, become less sure. Not yet. Alexandra's voice was stronger now. But if you don't leave right now, there will be. Marcus took a step forward, and Ethan felt his whole body go alert. He'd never been a fighter, had actively avoided confrontation for most of his life. But something about the way this man moved, the hunger in his eyes, tripped switches Ethan didn't know he had. This was how predators moved. This was how men looked right before they decided violence was acceptable. You should go. Ethan's voice came out lower than he intended, steadier. Now I should go. Marcus laughed, but it was an ugly sound. Who the hell are you to tell me anything? Alexandra is my wife. Ex-wife, Alexandra corrected sharply. A piece of paper doesn't change 7 years. It doesn't change what we had. What we had was a mistake. The only good thing that came out of our marriage was learning exactly what I don't want. Marcus's face contorted, the charm slipping away to reveal something raw and furious underneath. You don't get to just decide it's over. That's not how this works. Actually, Ethan kept his voice level, the way he did when explaining complex financial projections to clients who didn't want to hear bad news. That's exactly how this works. She decided it's over, and you standing here arguing about it isn't going to change that. Marcus's attention swung to Ethan, really focusing on him for the first time. Stay out of this. This doesn't concern you. You're threatening my girlfriend on a public beach at 7 in the morning. I'd say it concerns me plenty. The words felt strange in his mouth, girlfriend, but Ethan committed fully to the lie because the alternative was leaving Alexandra alone with this man, and every instinct he had was screaming that would be dangerous. His father had taught him to read men like this, the ones who smiled while their hand balled into fists, who spoke softly while their eyes promised violence. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, and Ethan forced himself not to look away. He thought about Emma, about the promises he'd made to her, spoken and unspoken, about the kind of man he wanted her to see when she looked at her father. A man who stood his ground, a man who didn't let bad things happen just because speaking up was uncomfortable. This isn't over. Marcus said it finally, directing the words at Alexandra. We'll talk soon. Privately. He turned and walked away back toward the parking lot, every line of his body radiating barely contained fury. Ethan didn't move until Marcus had gotten into a black Mercedes and driven away. Even then, it took another full minute before Alexandra's grip on his arm loosened. "I'm sorry," her voice was barely a whisper. "I shouldn't have. That was unfair of me to involve you like that." Ethan turned to face her, and for the first time since he'd known her, Alexandra Bennett looked small, vulnerable, in a way that had nothing to do with the absence of her usual armor. "How long has this been going on, since the divorce?" "Longer, really." She pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm morning air. "He was always intense. I thought it was passion, devotion. Took me 5 years to realize it was control. And since the divorce calls, text, showing up at places where I'm supposed to be alone." Alexandra laughed bitterly. "He knows my schedule better than my assistant does. I changed my phone number twice. Started going to different grocery stores. Took up running at 5 in the morning because he's not a morning person." She gestured at the beach around them. "I came here because I thought, I don't know what I thought, that he wouldn't find me, that I'd have an hour of peace. How did he know you were here? I don't know. That's the thing. I never know." She looked at Ethan, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the toll of years of hypervigilance. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to deal with this. You have your own life, your daughter. My daughter is safe. She's with her grandparents, probably on her third stack of pancakes right now. I've got nothing but time." "That's not the point." Then what as Alexandra opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. She just stared at him, looking lost in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. "Let me buy you breakfast. There's a diner about a mile from here. Great pancakes, terrible coffee. I used to go there with my brother when we were kids." "Ethan, I'm not asking you to explain anything. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying—" He paused, trying to find the right words. "You look like you haven't had a real meal in a while, and you probably shouldn't be alone right now." The silence stretched between them. Ethan watched Alexandra's face, saw the war playing out behind her eyes. Pride versus fear, self-sufficiency versus the desperate need for human connection. "Okay," she said it finally. "Breakfast." They walked back to the parking lot together, maintaining a careful distance that felt nothing like the intimacy they'd faked minutes earlier. Ethan's car was a practical Honda Civic, clean, but showing its age. Alexandra's was a silver BMW, sleek and expensive, parked 3 spaces away. "I'll follow you." She said it, and Ethan heard what she didn't say. "I need my car in case I need to leave quickly." That was her life now. That was the shape of her existence. Always ready to run, always watching for the next threat. The drive to the diner took exactly 7 minutes. Ethan spent all of them watching his rearview mirror, making sure Alexandra's BMW stayed close, making sure no black Mercedes appeared behind them. The diner was called the Coastal Kitchen, a name that promised more than it delivered. The building was a faded pink stucco structure that hadn't been updated since the 80s, with vinyl booths and a counter lined with stools that squeaked when you sat on them. But the pancakes were exactly as Ethan remembered, thick and fluffy, and swimming in real butter. And the coffee was exactly as bad. They took a booth near the back, far from the windows. Alexandra sat facing the door, her eyes flickering toward it every time someone entered. Ethan didn't comment on it. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and orthopedic shoes, took their orders without judgment, just 2 people having breakfast on a Saturday morning. "You've worked for me for 3 years, Alexandra said it after the waitress had left. "I just realized I know almost nothing about you." "Not much to know. I'm an analyst. I like spreadsheets. I have a daughter." "That's not nothing. A daughter is the opposite of nothing." Ethan felt himself smile despite everything. "Her name is Emma. She's 6, obsessed with dinosaurs, which apparently is a phase I was supposed to expect, but didn't. Wants to be either a paleontologist or a princess. Ideally both. A princess paleontologist." Alexandra's lips curved slightly. "I like that. She'd like you. She's very into what she calls boss ladies. Keeps asking me if my boss is a boss lady. What do you tell her?" "I tell her the truth, that my boss is the bossest lady I've ever met." Alexandra actually laughed at that, a real laugh that transformed her face into something almost unrecognizable. Ethan realized he'd never heard her laugh before. Not once in 3 years. "I don't think bossist is a word. Emma doesn't care about words being words. She makes up her own when the existing ones don't work. Smart girl. She gets it from her mother." The words came out before Ethan could stop them, and he saw Alexandra's expression shift, become curious. Her mother, Sienna, my ex-wife. Ethan took a sip of the terrible coffee, buying time. She's brilliant, genuinely brilliant. Got into Mensa when she was 12, graduated college at 19. Could have done anything with her life, but she decided that anything didn't include being a mother or a wife or anyone's anything, really. Ethan set down the coffee cup, stared at the ring it left on the table. She left when Emma was 2. Moved to California, got a PhD in something I can't pronounce, and sends birthday cards that always arrive late, if they arrive at all. I'm sorry, don't be. She's not a bad person. She's just a person who shouldn't have gotten married or had children. She didn't want those things. She wanted to
I
love
love our
them,
life together.
if that makes
Me too.
sense.
It's perfect.
And once she had
Just
them,
like you.
once she knew she could
Come
have
here.
them, sorry, I don't usually talk about this. Why not? Because it's ancient history. Because I've moved on. Because he stopped considered. Because people look at me differently when they know. Single dad abandoned by his wife. It comes with a lot of assumptions I'd rather avoid. What kind of assumptions? That I'm a project, something to fix, that I need saving or pity, or a woman to make my life complete. Ethan shook his head. I don't need any of that. My life is fine. Emma is fine. We're fine. The waitress arrived with their food, interrupting the moment. Ethan watched Alexandra cut her pancakes into precise squares, the same methodical approach she brought to everything. I understand, she said it finally. The assumptions. People look at me differently now, too. Because of Marcus, because of everything. The divorce, the way I handled it, the fact that I'm 43, and my personal life is a disaster, while my professional life is... She made a gesture that encompassed everything and nothing. They think I'm cold, that I don't feel anything, that I care more about the company than about people. Do you? Alexandra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. No, at least I didn't used to think so. Now I'm not sure. She set the fork down. I built that company from nothing, 12 years of my life. Every relationship, sacrificed every weekend, worked every moment I should have been doing something else. It all went into Bennett and Associates. And Marcus, he saw that. He understood that, or I thought he did. What happened? He worked there. Did you know that before your time? He was in mergers and acquisitions. Brilliant at his job, charming in all the right ways. We started dating, got engaged, got married. I thought I'd found someone who understood, someone who didn't resent the company or my dedication to it, someone who wanted to build something together. But what he actually wanted was ownership. Of me, of the company, of everything. Alexandra's voice had gone flat, clinical, like she was describing someone else's life. At first it was little things, suggestions about how I could do things differently, concerns about my schedule, wanting to know where I was at all times, who I was meeting with, what we discussed. I told myself it was because he cared, because he was invested in the business. When did you realize it wasn't? Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. 3 years into the marriage, we were at a dinner party, investors, clients, the usual crowd. A colleague made a joke about me being the boss at work and Marcus being the boss at home. Everyone laughed except Marcus. She looked down at her plate. That night he told me I'd embarrassed him, that I needed to learn to be less visible, less dominant, that a real wife would know how to make her husband look good instead of always taking the spotlight. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. What did you do? Nothing. That's the worst part. I did nothing. I apologized. I changed how I acted at events. I started checking with him before I spoke to anyone, before I made any decisions. I told myself I was being a good partner, that marriage was about compromise. Alexandra laughed, and there was no humor in it at all. It took me 4 more years to realize I was the only one compromising. What finally made you leave? He hit me. The words dropped like stones into still water. Once. Only once. I think he surprised himself as much as he surprised me. But in that moment, with my cheek burning and his face looking almost confused, I finally saw clearly. Saw what I'd become, what I'd let him turn me into. Alexandra finally looked up, and Ethan saw tears glistening in her eyes, that she was clearly fighting not to let fall. I filed for divorce the next day. Moved out that night. I thought it would be over once the papers were signed. She paused. I was so naive. This isn't naive. This is surviving. Is it because it doesn't feel like surviving? It feels like drowning in slow motion every day, wondering if today is the day he finally... She stopped, pressed her hand against her mouth. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, because you needed to tell someone. But why you're my employee. This could be an HR nightmare, sexual harassment, inappropriate workplace relationships. We're not at work. Ethan kept his voice quiet. And I'm not your employee right now. Right now, I'm just a guy who saw someone struggling and wanted to help. That's all. Alexandra stared at him like she couldn't quite comprehend what he was saying, like kindness with no strings attached was a foreign concept, something she'd forgotten existed. Thank you, she whispered it. Don't thank me yet. The coffee here really is terrible. She laughed again, a wet sound that was half sob, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Not attraction exactly, though she was beautiful, had always been beautiful, but something deeper. Recognition, understanding. They were both survivors, he realized. Both people who'd built walls out of necessity and worn armor until it became a second skin. Both people who'd learned the hard way that trust was a risk not everyone could afford. I should go. Alexandra said it after they'd finished eating and the check had been paid, Ethan insisting, despite Alexandra's protests. I have things I should do. Like what? Like not sitting in a diner telling my life story to a subordinate. I thought we weren't at work right now. Alexandra's smile was small but real. We're not, but eventually we will be. And this, she gestured between them. This is complicated. It doesn't have to be. Yes, it does, because you're a good man, Ethan. I've known that since the day I hired you. You're solid and reliable, and you never ask for anything, and you never make waves. And she stopped, shook her head. I can't drag you into my mess. You have a daughter. You have a life. I also have a choice. What does that mean? Ethan stood, leaving enough cash on the table to cover the tip. It means if you need help, real help, not just someone to pretend to be your boyfriend at the beach, I'm here. Call me, text me, show up at my door at 3 in the morning, whatever you need. Why, Wawa? Because you asked. Because I can. Because he paused, thinking of Emma, of the kind of person he wanted her to become, of the example he wanted to set. Because my daughter is going to grow up in a world where women like you exist. Women who build companies and run boardrooms and don't take crap from anyone. And if something happened to you because I had the chance to help and didn't take it, I wouldn't be able to look her in the eye. Alexandra was silent for so long that Ethan thought he'd overstepped, said too much, pushed too hard. But then she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, her personal card with handwriting on the back, and pressed it into his hand. My cell is on the back, in case you ever need anything too. They walked out to the parking lot together, and the Florida sun was fully up now, turning everything golden and warm. It felt wrong somehow, all that brightness after the darkness of their conversation. Be careful, Ethan said it as Alexandra unlocked her car. Please. I'm always careful. I know. But be extra careful. She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her eyes. Then she got into her car, started the engine, and drove away. Ethan stood in the parking lot watching until her silver BMW disappeared around the corner. Then he got into his own car and sat there, hands on the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Emma wants to know if she can have ice cream for lunch. I said I had to ask you. Please say yes. I've already promised her. Ethan smiled despite everything and typed back. Fine, but she has to eat something green first. His mother's response was immediate. Green ice cream counts, right? No, Mom, it does not. He started his car and pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward his parents' house in the suburbs north of Tampa. The drive took 30 minutes through neighborhoods he'd known his whole life, past the high school where he'd graduated, the hardware store where his father still bought supplies for weekend projects, the park where he'd learned to ride a bike. His parents lived in a ranch-style house with a workshop in the back, where Clayton built furniture that he gave away to family and friends because Maureen said they didn't have room for another bookshelf. Ethan pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Through the front window he could see movement, Emma bouncing around the living room, his mother's gray hair as she bent to tie Emma's shoes, his father in his recliner with the newspaper spread across his lap. Normal, safe, the life he'd built brick by careful brick after Sienna had demolished everything. But even as he walked up the path to the front door, some part of his mind stayed back at that beach with a woman in a yellow sundress who looked nothing like his boss, with a man whose eyes held something dark and dangerous with a lie he'd told so easily. It scared him. This is my boyfriend. Ethan knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that this wasn't over, that Marcus wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat gracefully, that Alexandra was in danger, real danger, and all the boardroom brilliance in the world wouldn't protect her from someone who decided she belonged to him. Ethan Carter had spent 4 years being invisible, being safe, being the kind of man who didn't take risks or make waves or get involved in things that weren't his business. But Alexandra Bennett had looked at him like he was the only solid thing in her world, like he was safe. And Ethan Carter, whatever else he was, had never been able to walk away from someone who needed help. The question was, what the hell was he going to do about it? He didn't have an answer yet. But as he opened the door and Emma launched herself at his legs, squealing about ice cream and dinosaurs, and how Grandpa had promised to teach her to use a hammer, Ethan knew he was going to have to find one.
I love our
The
life
week that
together.
followed
Me
felt
too.
like
It's
walking through
perfect.
fog.
Just like
Monday
you.
arrived with his
Come
usual
here.
demands. Ethan dropped down, watched her skip through the gates with her backpack down, and drove to Bennett and Associates. The office was on the 12th floor of a glass tower downtown on all chrome and polish, and the hum of people making money move from one place to another. He sat at his desk analyzing third-quarter projections for a client's portfolio, but his eyes kept drifting to his phone. No messages, no missed calls. Maybe the beach had been an anomaly, a strange intersection of circumstance that didn't need to become anything more. Maybe Alexandra Bennett had woken up Monday morning and remembered she was a CEO with resources and lawyers and security systems, and she didn't need a financial analyst with a 6-year-old to save her. Tuesday passed the same way. Wednesday brought a brief email about the Henderson account professional distant, exactly like every other email he'd received from her in 3 years. Then Thursday evening shattered the illusion. Ethan was helping Emma with her math homework, counting out plastic dinosaurs to illustrate addition problems when his phone buzzed. 9:47. He glanced at the screen and felt his heart kick against his ribs. Alexandra Bennett, Beach. That's how he'd saved her contact, because seeing her name in his phone felt too real, too much like something that could cost him if anyone saw it. Ethan, her voice was wrong, too tight, too controlled. What's wrong? He was already standing, already reaching for his keys. Marcus is here, at my house. I don't know how he got past security. He's in the driveway. His car is blocking mine. I can see him through the window just sitting there, watching. Call 911. Right now, I already did. They said they're sending someone, but it could be 20 minutes. Ethan, I don't have 20 minutes. He's getting out of the car. He's walking toward the door. Emma looked up from her dinosaurs, sensing something wrong. Ethan forced his voice to stay calm as he grabbed his jacket. Sweetheart, Daddy has to go help a friend. I'm going to call Grandma to come stay with you. Stay on the line, he said it to Alexandra while simultaneously pulling up his mother's number. Don't let him in. Don't answer if he knocks. I won't. Her voice cracked. I'm scared. I'm so scared. I know, but you're going to be okay. I promise. I'm 10 minutes away. Maureen answered on the second ring. Ethan gave her the abbreviated version work emergency needed her to come sit with Emma right away, and she said she'd be there in 5 minutes. His parents only lived 15 minutes away, but his mother drove like she was perpetually late for something important. Marcus was knocking now. Ethan could hear it through the phone, the steady, deliberate pounding of fist against wood. Alexandra, Marcus's voice muffled but audible. I know you're in there. We need to talk. Just talk. That's all I want. Don't answer him. Ethan was in his car now, backing out of the driveway too fast, tires squealing. Don't engage. Just wait for the police. Alexandra, please. Marcus's tone shifted, became almost pleading. I made mistakes. I know that. But we can work through this. We can go back to how things were. Remember how good it was. Remember how much we loved each other. Ethan pushed the gas pedal harder, weaving through traffic with a recklessness that would have terrified him any other day. But tonight he wasn't thinking about safety or consequences or the fact that he was leaving his daughter with his mother so he could race across town to help his boss. He was thinking about the fear in Alexandra's voice, about the way she'd looked on that beach, about the promise he'd made. I'm here if you need help. Alexandra opened the door. Marcus's voice had changed again, the sweetness curdling into something darker. Don't make me do something we'll both regret. He's threatening me. Alexandra's whisper was barely audible. He's actually threatening me. Stay calm. I'm almost there. Ethan blew through a red light horn blaring at the car that swerved to avoid him. What if the police don't come in time? What if he breaks in? What if he's not going to break in? You have a security system. You have cameras. He knows that. But even as Ethan said it, he heard the sound of shattering glass through the phone. He broke the window. Alexandra's voice shot up an octave. He's reaching through. He's unlocking the door from the inside. Run. Go out the back. Right now. I can't. The back door. The line went dead. Ethan drove like a man possessed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Alexandra's house was in West Shore, one of Tampa's upscale waterfront neighborhoods, where houses started at $1 million and security was supposed to mean something. He made the drive in 6 minutes flat, not caring about speed limits or stop signs or anything except getting there before Marcus decided patience was overrated. The driveway looked exactly as Alexandra had described. A black Mercedes S-Class blocking the path, driver's door open like Marcus had been in too much of a hurry to close it, the front door standing ajar. Broken glass glittering on the steps where Marcus had smashed his way through the decorative window panel. Ethan didn't think. He just ran. The house was dark except for the lights Alexandra had left on in the living room. Glass crunched under his feet as he stepped through the broken window in the door. His heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat. Alexander, no answer. He moved through the house, checking rooms as he went. Living room empty. Kitchen empty. His breath came fast and shallow. Every instinct screamed at him to slow down, to be careful, to call for backup. But Alexandra was somewhere in this house with a man who'd already proven he didn't respect boundaries or restraining orders or basic human decency. Then he heard it, a voice coming from upstairs, smooth and terrible. All I ever wanted was for us to be together. Is that so wrong? Is it so wrong to want the woman I love? Marcus, please, just let me go. The police are coming. If you leave now, Marcus laughed, the police can't do anything. My father made sure of that. You think that restraining order means anything? You think a piece of paper can keep me away from what's mine? Ethan climbed the stairs, each step deliberate and silent. The voice was coming from the master bedroom at the end of the hall. Through the partially open door, he could see Alexandra backed against the far wall, her phone clutched in one hand. Marcus was advancing toward her, his face twisted with something that wasn't quite rage, wasn't quite love, but some terrible fusion of both. Get away from her. Ethan's voice came out steadier than he felt. He pushed the door open, stepped into the room, positioned himself between Alexandra and Marcus. Marcus turned, and his expression shifted from obsession to pure, undiluted hatred. You, the boyfriend, I told you to stay out of this, and I told you to leave her alone. Seems like neither of us is good at taking advice. Do you have any idea who I am? Who my family is? I could destroy you, your career, your reputation, your pathetic little life. You could try. But right now you're standing in a woman's bedroom after breaking into her house. That's not a threat. That's a felony. She's my wife, ex-wife. And the restraining order says you're not supposed to be within 500 feet of her. You're about 5 feet away. That's going to be hard to explain to a judge. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. You think you're clever. You think you've figured this out. But you don't understand anything. Alexandra and I, we have history. We have a connection that you couldn't possibly comprehend. What I comprehend is that you're scaring her. What I comprehend is that you broke into her home. What I comprehend is that if you don't leave right now, the only connection you're going to have is with a jail cell. For a long moment, no one moved. Ethan could feel Alexandra behind him, could hear her ragged breathing, could sense the fear radiating off her in waves. In the distance, finally sirens. Marcus's head turned toward the sound, and something in his expression shifted. The madness faded, replaced by cold calculation. This isn't over. It will never be over. She'll always be mine, no matter what, some judge says, no matter what you do. Maybe. But tonight it ends. Walk out that door, get in your car, and don't come back. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, his eyes burning with a hatred that made Ethan's skin crawl. Then he smiled, a thin, cruel smile that held no warmth at all. I'll see you soon, Alexandra. Both of you. He walked past Ethan close enough that their shoulders almost touched and disappeared down the stairs. A moment later, Ethan heard the front door open and close. The Mercedes' engine roared to life. Gravel crunched as Marcus backed out of the driveway and sped away. Alexandra collapsed against Ethan, her whole body shaking. He's gone. You're safe. It's okay. It's not okay. It's never going to be okay. He'll come back. He'll always come back. Not this time. Not ever again. I won't let him. The police arrived 5 minutes later, two officers who took statements and photographs and promised that Marcus would be arrested by morning. A photographer documented the broken window, the scratches on the door where Marcus had forced the lock. Delilah Hawthorne was called. Evidence was collected. Through all of it, Ethan stayed by Alexandra's side answering questions when she couldn't, making sure she drank water, keeping her grounded when the shaking got too bad. By the time the last officer left, it was nearly 1 in the morning. The house felt violated, contaminated by Marcus's presence. A board covered the broken window, but it was temporary, flimsy. Alexandra stood in the middle of her living room looking lost. You shouldn't stay here tonight, Ethan said it gently. Not alone, I don't have anywhere else to go. You could come to my place. Guest room, Emma would love to see
I
you.
love our life together.
Or I could stay
Me too.
here.
It's
The
perfect.
couch is fine.
Just like you.
Alexandra
Come
looked
here.
at him. Would you stay? I mean, I know it's hard to ask, but I don't think I can be alone right now. Of course. So they spent what remained of the night in Alexandra's fortress of a house that suddenly felt like nothing more than walls and windows that could be broken. Ethan tried to sleep on the couch in the living room, but mostly lay awake listening for sounds that didn't come. At some point, he heard footsteps and looked up to find Alexandra standing in the doorway silhouetted by the hall light. Can't sleep either. She shook her head. Every time I close my eyes, I see him, hear him. Come sit. He made space on the couch and Alexandra sat at the other end, pulling her knees up to her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller. Want to talk about it? No. Yes. I don't know. She was quiet for a moment. Delilah called while you were talking to the police. Marcus was arrested 3 hours ago. They got him at his apartment. He didn't even try to run. That's good. Is it? Because tomorrow his father will make some phone calls, and by noon Marcus will be out on bail. And then what? Then we make sure the next time he's locked up, he stays locked up. How do we do that? Ethan didn't have a good answer, so he just sat there in the dark with her, a quiet presence until the sky outside started to lighten and the birds began their morning songs. At 6, Alexandra finally dozed off, her head tipped back against the couch cushion, her face still creased with worry even in sleep. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. How's your friend Emma, wants to know when you're coming home. He typed back, soon. Thank you for staying with her. She's fine. Take your time. Love you. At 7, Alexandra stirred, blinked awake, looked momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. Morning, Ethan kept his voice soft. Coffee, please. They sat in her kitchen drinking coffee and eating toast because neither of them had the energy for anything more complicated. The morning light was harsh, unforgiving, showing every shadow under Alexandra's eyes. I have to go home soon. Emma will be worried. I know. Thank you for staying. For everything. Alexandra set down her coffee mug. Ethan, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Marcus doesn't give up. He doesn't lose. If you get involved, really involved, he'll come after you too. Your job, your daughter, everything. I'm already involved. Then maybe you should uninvolve yourself. While you still can. Is that what you want? Alexandra looked at him, and for the first time since the beach, Ethan saw something other than fear in her eyes. He saw possibility, hope, the fragile beginning of trust. No, but it's what you should do. Let me worry about what I should do. He stood, rinsed his mug in the sink. I'm going to head home. But call me later. Let me know what Delilah says. And lock the doors behind me. Ethan. He turned. Why are you doing this? Really, he thought about Emma, about the drawing she'd made with 3 figures standing in front of a house, about the way she'd asked if his friend was going to stay, about wanting to be the kind of man his daughter could be proud of. Because sometimes standing up is the only thing that makes sense, even when it doesn't. Marcus Bennett walked out of the Hillsborough County Jail at 11:43 that same night, 4 hours after being booked. His father had made 3 phone calls, one to a judge, one to the district attorney, one to the chief of police, and suddenly the man who'd broken into a house and terrorized his ex-wife was free pending a hearing that might never come. Delilah Hawthorne called Alexandra at midnight with the news, her voice tight with frustration. They're claiming it's a misunderstanding, that Marcus still had a key from before the divorce and didn't realize he wasn't welcome. The broken window. He'll say it was already broken. The restraining order violation, he'll argue he was never properly served. That's insane. You have my 911 call. You have Ethan's testimony. I know, and we'll use all of it. But right now he's out, and we need to be prepared for what comes next. What came next was a text message that arrived on Ethan's phone at 1:17 in the morning, 23 minutes after he'd finally fallen asleep on his own couch. The number was blocked, this message brief. You should have stayed out of this. He forwarded it to Delilah, to Alexandra, to the detective who'd taken their statements. Then he lay awake until dawn, staring at his ceiling, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. Friday morning brought another text, this one more specific. Your daughter goes to Riverside Elementary, doesn't she? Nice school, safe neighborhood. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He called the school before 6, got the principal's voicemail, left a message that probably sounded unhinged. Then he called the main office at 7 when it opened and explained without explaining too much that there was a security concern and only he or his parents should be allowed to pick up Emma. The principal, Dr. Sarah Kimball, listened with the patience of someone who'd heard every parent panic under the sun. Mr. Carter, I understand your concern. Can you tell me more about the nature of the threat? There's a man, my girlfriend's ex-husband. He's been harassing her. Now he's threatening me. I need to know Emma is safe. Has this man made specific threats against your daughter? He mentioned her school by name. That got her attention. By 8:30, Ethan was sitting in Dr. Kimball's office with a photo of Marcus pulled from Google. He'd found it on a law firm website where Marcus still had a profile despite not working there anymore, and new protocols were being put in place. Photo ID required for pickup, a flag in Emma's file, security notified. Emma noticed the change immediately when Ethan walked her all the way to her classroom instead of dropping her at the gate. Daddy, why are you coming inside? Just want to make sure you get to class, okay, sweetheart? But I always get to class, okay? Her 6-year-old logic was flawless. Ethan knelt down to her level, tried to find words that wouldn't scare her, but wouldn't leave her vulnerable either. Sometimes grown-ups have to be extra careful. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means we're being smart. Is someone trying to hurt you? The question hit him like a fist. No, baby. Nobody's going to hurt anyone. Daddy's just making sure we're all safe, okay? She studied his face with those eyes that saw too much. You always keep me safe, right, Daddy? Always. That's my job. But as he drove to work, Ethan felt the weight of that promise settling on his shoulders like lead. How could he keep Emma safe from a man who had resources, connections, and the kind of privilege that made restraining orders feel like suggestions? How could he protect a 6-year-old from someone who'd already proven that rules didn't apply to him? The answer came Wednesday afternoon in the form of an email from Delilah Hawthorne to both Ethan and Alexandra. Subject line: emergency motion. Marcus's attorney, James Hardwick, had filed for an emergency hearing to dismiss the restraining order. The motion claimed Alexandra was abusing the legal system to harass her ex-husband, that the incidents she documented were either exaggerated or fabricated, and that Ethan Carter, here the motion got particularly ugly, was a subordinate employee engaged in an inappropriate relationship with his superior, motivated by potential financial gain or career advancement. The hearing was scheduled for Friday, 2 days to prepare. They met at Delilah's office Thursday afternoon, a conference room on the 8th floor of a building downtown where everything was glass and steel and the kind of aggressive professionalism that came with hourly rates Ethan didn't want to think about. Delilah was 50, sharp-eyed with silver hair, cut short, in a navy suit that probably cost more than Ethan's car payment. She spread documents across the table with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. Here's what they're going to do. They'll paint Alexandra as a vindictive ex-wife. They'll paint Marcus as a devoted husband trying to reconcile. And they'll paint you, Mr. Carter, as the other man, the reason the marriage failed, the person who stands to benefit from Alexandra's vulnerability. That's not true. Truth is irrelevant. What matters is what they can make a judge believe. Alexandra sat very still, her hands folded on the table. She'd worn a gray suit today, severe and professional, but Ethan could see the tension in her jaw. They're going to ask about us, about our relationship. Yes, and we need to be honest. You stayed at Ms. Bennett's house after the incident. That's on record. So, the question is how we frame it. Ethan stayed because I was terrified and he was being a decent human being. Delilah's expression didn't change. That's what we'll say. But be prepared for them to imply otherwise. Be prepared for questions about your employment, your compensation, any interactions that could be construed as inappropriate. There haven't been any inappropriate interactions until you became her boyfriend on a beach. That was to protect her from Marcus. I know, but Hardwick will twist it. He's good at twisting things. She turned to Ethan. Mr. Carter, they're going to come after you hard. Your job, your credibility, your motivations. Can you handle that? Ethan thought about Emma, about the drawing she'd made, about the way she'd asked if Alex could be her mother. He thought about Alexandra's face when Marcus had her backed against a wall, about the fear that had made her voice shake when she called for help. I can handle it. Good. Because if we lose this hearing, the restraining order gets lifted. Marcus will be free to approach Alexandra anywhere, anytime. And based on his pattern of behavior, that will escalate quickly. How quickly Delilah met his eyes. Someone could get hurt. Probably will get hurt. These situations don't de-escalate on their own. The hearing took place in courtroom 4B at 9 o'clock Friday morning. Ethan had called in sick to work first time in 3 years and arranged for his mother to take Emma to school. The courtroom was smaller than he'd expected, paneled in dark wood that absorbed sound.
I love our
and
life
made
together.
everything feel
Me too.
muffled.
It's perfect.
A handful
Just
of people
like
sat
you.
in the gallery.
Come
A
here.
reporter who might have been from Marcus's family, and a young man with a laptop who was probably a law clerk. Judge Margaret Sullivan presided, a woman in her mid-50s with gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. She listened to Hardwick's opening arguments without expression. Your Honor, my client is a respected attorney who made the mistake of loving his wife too much. Yes, he went to her home. Yes, he entered without explicit permission. But he still had a key, still considered it partly his home, and was attempting to have a conversation about reconciliation. The restraining order filed by Ms. Bennett is a transparent attempt to use the legal system as a weapon in what is essentially a domestic disagreement. Delilah stood, her voice cool. Your Honor, breaking and entering is not a domestic disagreement. Stalking is not love. And the pattern of behavior documented in our filings shows clear harassment over 18 months. My client has 208 documented contact attempts, 47 instances of Mr. Bennett appearing at locations where Ms. Bennett was present, incredible threats made to a witness. The threats you mentioned were never explicit. They didn't need to be explicit to be threatening. Judge Sullivan raised a hand. I've read the filings. I want to hear from the parties. Ms. Bennett, please take the stand. Alexandra walked to the witness box with her head high, but Ethan saw the tremor in her hands as she placed them on the Bible to swear her oath. Delilah took her through the timeline methodically: the marriage, the control, the isolation, the moment when Marcus hit her, and she finally left. And since the divorce, he won't leave me alone. Calls from different numbers. Texts from email addresses I've never seen. He shows up at my gym, my office, restaurants where I'm having lunch. 3 weeks ago, he was outside my house at 2 in the morning. I have security footage. Hardwick cross-examined with surgical precision. Miss Bennett, you're the CEO of a successful company. Is it fair to say you're used to being in control? I'm used to running a business, yes. And when things don't go your way, how do you respond? I work to find solutions, by any means necessary, by legal and ethical means, including using the legal system to punish an ex-husband who hurt your pride. He didn't hurt my pride. He hurt me, physically. And then he refused to accept that I had the right to leave. Hardwick paused, letting the emotion in her voice hang in the air, like she'd done something wrong by caring. Ms. Bennett, isn't it true that you began a relationship with one of your employees shortly after filing for divorce? Numan, I met Ethan Carter on a beach 2 weeks ago when Marcus found me and wouldn't leave me alone. Ethan pretended to be my boyfriend to make Marcus go away. So you used Mr. Carter as a prop in your drama with your ex-husband. I asked for help. He gave it. And what has he received in return? Nothing, nothing. He hasn't spent the night at your house. Alexandra's jaw tightened. He stayed on my couch after Marcus broke into my home because I was too scared to be alone. That's not a relationship. That's kindness. Hardwick smiled like he'd gotten exactly what he wanted. The hearing recessed for 15 minutes. Ethan found Alexandra in the hallway, her back against the wall, taking slow breaths. You did great. I felt like I was on trial, like I was the one who did something wrong. That's what they want you to feel. Is it working, little? Then they're winning. Ethan was called next. He walked to the stand, feeling every eye in the courtroom on him, wondering what they saw. The helpful colleague, the opportunistic, subordinate, the white knight trying to rescue a damsel. None of those felt accurate. He was just a man who'd seen someone in trouble and couldn't walk away. Delilah asked him about the beach, about Marcus's behavior, about the threatening texts. He answered clearly, keeping his voice level, using the same analytical tone he used when presenting financial data to clients. Make it objective. Make it factual. Remove emotion from the equation. Then Hardwick stood up, and Ethan understood why Delilah had warned him. Mr. Carter, you work for Ms. Bennett, correct? Yes. In what capacity? Senior financial analyst. And your salary, $85,000 a year. That's quite good for someone your age with your experience. I'm qualified for my position. I'm sure you are. Tell me, Mr. Carter, have you spent the night at Ms. Bennett's home once after Marcus broke in? On her couch, you said. That's correct. And you expect this court to believe that a single man and a wealthy, attractive woman spent the night together and nothing happened? Ethan felt heat rise in his face but kept his voice steady. I expect the court to believe the truth. The truth. Let's talk about truth. You have a young daughter, don't you? Yes. Emma. She's 6, and her mother is not in the picture. Why is that? She left when Emma was 2. That must have been difficult. Raising a child alone, making ends meet on an analyst's salary. Ethan saw where this was going and felt anger spark in his chest. We manage fine. But wouldn't it be nice to have more security resources? Perhaps a relationship with someone who could provide those things. I'm not in a relationship with Ms. Bennett, but you'd like to be, wouldn't you? You've already played her boyfriend once. Perhaps you saw an opportunity. Objection. Delilah was on her feet. Counsel is speculating about my witness's motivations without any evidence. I'm establishing motive, Your Honor. Mr. Carter has financial incentive to ingratiate himself with his employer. He has personal incentive as a single father seeking stability. And he has opportunity given that he's inserted himself into Ms. Bennett's life at her most vulnerable moment. Judge Sullivan looked at Ethan. Mr. Carter, do you have feelings for Ms. Bennett beyond professional respect? The courtroom went silent. Ethan felt the weight of the question, the trap built into it. Say no, and he was lying, undermining his credibility. Say yes, and he confirmed Hardwick's narrative. I care about her well-being. I would care about anyone's well-being in her situation. That's not what I asked. Ethan met the judge's eyes. I think Ms. Bennett is remarkable. I think she's been through hell and come out the other side fighting. If that's having feelings beyond professional respect, then yes. But that doesn't change the facts about Marcus Bennett's behavior. Hardwick pounced. So you admit you have romantic feelings for your boss. I admit I admire her. I admit I want to help her. And I admit that watching a man terrorize a woman made me angry enough to get involved, even though it could cost me everything. Everything. What could it cost you, Mr. Carter? My job, my daughter's sense of safety, my own peace of mind. And I did it anyway because some things are more important than staying comfortable. The words came out harder than he'd intended, years of careful restraint cracking. Ethan saw Hardwick's eyes narrow, saw the judge's expression shift to something that might have been interest. No further questions. The hearing continued for another 2 hours. Marcus took the stand and played the wounded husband, perfectly voice-breaking at just the right moments, eyes glistening with unshed tears, the picture of a man who loved too much and made mistakes he deeply regretted. He was good, disturbingly good. Ethan watched and understood why Alexandra had stayed for 7 years. This version of Marcus was compelling, sympathetic, the kind of man you wanted to believe in. Then Delilah asked one question that changed everything. Mr. Bennett, do you love your ex-wife? Of course, with all my heart. And when someone you love says they don't want to be with you anymore, how do you respond? I try to change their mind. By any means necessary. Marcus paused just a beat too long, by showing them they're making a mistake. Even if they have asked you to leave them alone, sometimes people don't know what they really want. And you do. I know what we had. I know what we could have again. Delilah let that answer sit for a moment. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Sullivan called a 30-minute recess. When they reconvened, her face was unreadable. I've reviewed the evidence and heard testimony from both parties. Mr. Bennett's behavior raises serious concerns. The documented pattern of contact despite clear requests to stop the appearance at Ms. Bennett's residence, the entry into her home, these are not the actions of a man seeking reconciliation. These are the actions of a man refusing to accept rejection. However, I'm also mindful of the serious accusations being made and the need for due process. Therefore, I'm upholding the temporary restraining order. It will remain in effect pending a full hearing in 2 weeks. Mr. Bennett, you are explicitly ordered to have no contact with Mrs. Bennett or with Mr. Carter. No phone calls, no texts, no third-party communications, and absolutely no physical proximity. Violation will result in immediate arrest and no bail. Do you understand? Marcus nodded, his face a careful blank. I understand, Your Honor. They left the courthouse at 3 in the afternoon. The sky had turned gray, threatening rain. Ethan walked Alexandra to her car in the parking garage, neither of them speaking until they were alone. 2 weeks. Another 2 weeks of looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to show up, wondering when he'll decide a restraining order isn't worth respecting. Alexandra leaned against her BMW, suddenly looking exhausted. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being afraid. You won't have to. We'll make sure Ethan stop. She cut him off, her voice sharp. Stop acting like this is fixable. Stop acting like your presence makes me safe. You have a little girl. You have a life. And I'm dragging you into a nightmare that could destroy everything you've worked for. So what? I should just walk away. Yes. That what you want? Alexandra looked at him, and for the first time since the beach, Ethan saw something other than fear in her eyes. He saw longing, hope, the
I
fragile
love our
beginning
life
of
together.
something neither
Me
of them
too.
could
It's
name.
perfect.
No,
Just
but it's
like
what
you.
should do.
Come here.
While you the rain started, and stood there softly first, then hard. Ethan stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, close enough to feel the heat coming off her, despite the cooling air. I'm not good at doing what I should do. His hand came up, touched her face, and then he was kissing her, soft and careful and full of everything he couldn't say. She made a sound that might have been surprise or relief or both, and then she was kissing him back, her hands fisting in his shirt like she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Rain dripped down their faces, soaking their clothes, and Ethan didn't care even a little bit. This is a terrible idea. Alexandra's voice was rough. Probably. You're my employee. Not right now, I'm not. Right now, you're just yours, if you want me to be. She kissed him again, fiercer this time, and Ethan felt 4 years of careful control shatter. This was reckless. This was dangerous. This was everything he'd promised himself he wouldn't do after Sienna left. But standing in a parking garage in the rain, with a woman who'd been through hell and still had the courage to hope for something better, Ethan couldn't remember why safety had seemed so important. They agreed to take things slow, to be careful, to think about Emma and the company and all the ways this could go wrong. But that night, Ethan lay in bed staring at his ceiling and replaying the kiss, the feel of Alexandra's mouth on his, the way she'd held him like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. His phone buzzed with a text at 11. Thank you for today, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. He typed back, you would have been fine. You're the strongest person I know. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then I don't feel strong. I feel terrified and exhausted and like I'm one bad day away from falling apart. Then fall apart. I'll be here to help you put the pieces back together. Why are you so good to me? Ethan thought about that question. Because you deserve it. Because someone should be. Because when I look at you and I see someone worth fighting for. Her reply came quickly. I'm falling for you. I know it's too fast and too complicated and probably a disaster waiting to happen, but I need you to know. I'm falling for you. He stared at the words, feeling something crack open in his chest. I'm already gone. Have been since the beach. They texted until midnight, saying things that felt too big for the daylight, making promises that probably shouldn't be made over a phone screen. When Ethan finally fell asleep, he dreamed of Alexandra in a yellow sundress, standing on a beach, and this time when he walked toward her, she smiled. The week that followed brought a dangerous kind of normalcy. Marcus didn't violate the restraining order. He didn't call or text or show up unannounced, but his presence was felt anyway, a shadow over everything Alexandra did. Monday brought flowers to her office, 24 white roses with a card that read, "Remember October 7th, our wedding day, 7 years ago, forever in my heart." Ma'am Alexandra threw them away immediately, but the damage was done. Her assistant had seen them. Her colleagues had seen them. By lunch, the whispers had started speculation about whether she was getting back together with her ex-husband, whether the restraining order had been a misunderstanding, whether maybe Marcus Bennett wasn't the villain everyone thought. Tuesday brought emails to 3 members of Bennett and Associates Board of Directors. Delilah got copies from a sympathetic board member, and they were masterpieces of subtle manipulation. "I'm writing out of concern for Alexandra's well-being. As her ex-husband, I perhaps understand better than most the immense pressure she places on herself. I worry that recent events indicate she may be struggling more than she lets on. I say this not to create problems, but to ensure she has the support she needs during what must be a difficult time." One board member called Alexandra directly, ostensibly to check in, but really to gauge whether she was stable enough to continue running the company. Alexandra handled it with the cold professionalism she perfected over 12 years, but Ethan heard the fury in her voice when she recounted the conversation later. "He's poisoning everything, making people doubt me, making them think I'm the problem." Wednesday brought the worst violation yet. Alexandra was shopping at the Publix on Howard Avenue, the one closest to her house, when she turned down the cereal aisle and froze. Marcus stood at the far end, 70 feet away, exactly 20 feet beyond the restraining order's 50-foot requirement. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there with a basket looking at boxes of granola like he hadn't orchestrated this encounter with surgical precision. Their eyes met. Marcus smiled. Then he turned and walked away. Alexandra left her cart where it stood and drove home shaking so hard she nearly rear-ended a Honda at a red light. She called Delilah, who called the police, who took a report and said technically Marcus hadn't violated anything since he'd maintained the required distance. But they'd note the incident, add it to the file, build the pattern. Building patterns took time. Time measured in days of looking over shoulders and checking locks and wondering when patience would run out. Thursday afternoon, Ethan got a call from his mother. "Emma drew something at school today. Her teacher thought maybe you should see it." His mother texted a photo. Emma's drawing showed 3 figures, a tall one labeled Daddy, a small one labeled Me, and a medium one labeled Alex the Friend. They were standing in front of a house with hearts floating above their heads and a sun smiling in the corner. At the bottom, in Emma's careful printing, "My New Family." Ethan stared at the drawing for a long time, feeling something tighten in his chest. Emma had drawn what she wanted, what she'd already started building in her 6-year-old mind. A complete family, a mother who stayed. He called Alexandra that night. "Emma's asking about you, wondering when she'll see you again." That's sweet, but he could hear the hesitation in Alexandra's voice. "Is it too much?" "If it's too much, I understand. This is all moving fast and you didn't sign up for Ethan. Can I meet her properly, I mean?" "Not just a wave at the beach. Are you sure?" "No. But I want to try." They met at Ballast Point Park on Sunday afternoon. The park sat on the edge of Tampa Bay, all palm trees and playgrounds and paths winding along the water. Emma arrived wearing her favorite purple dress and clutching Princess Chompers, the plastic T-Rex she'd had since she was 3 and refused to abandon despite its missing arm and faded paint. "Is this your friend?" Emma studied Alexandra with the solemn intensity children brought to important assessments. "This is Alex. Remember I told you about her? You said she's a boss lady." "I am." Alexandra knelt down to Emma's level, a gesture Ethan appreciated more than he could say. "And you must be Emma. Your dad talks about you all the time." "He does all the time. He says you know more about dinosaurs than anyone he's ever met." "That's because dinosaurs are the best. This is Princess Chompers." Emma held up the T-Rex. "She's a princess and a dinosaur. You can be 2 things at once. That's very true. I'm a boss lady and someone who's scared sometimes." 2 things at once," Emma tilted her head. "What are you scared of?" "Lots of things, but mostly of not being good enough. Daddy gets scared too. He thinks I don't know, but I do." She said it matter-of-factly, the way children stated truths adults spent years denying. Your daddy is very brave. He is. Are you brave too? I'm trying to be. Good. Because if you're going to be daddy's friend, you have to be brave. Our family is brave. They walked along the path, Emma between them, chattering about school and dinosaurs, and her teacher, Miss Martinez, who apparently knew everything about everything. Alexandra listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually hearing the answers, not just making polite conversation. At the playground, Emma insisted Alexandra help build a sandcastle. They worked together for 20 minutes, Emma directing operations like a tiny foreman, while Alexandra followed instructions with more patience than Ethan had ever seen her show in board meetings. When the castle was done, complete with a moat and a flag made from a stick and a leaf, Emma declared it perfect. This is where Princess Chompers lives. Anyone can come visit, but you have to be nice. No meanness allowed in this castle. That's a good rule. The best rule. Right, Daddy? Right, sweetheart? Ethan watched his daughter and what girlfriend, partner. Whatever Alexandra was, watched them together and felt something click into place. This could work. This strange, complicated, probably ill-advised thing could actually work. Later, after Emma had exhausted herself running between the swings and the slide, they sat on a bench near the water. Emma fell asleep against Alexandra's side, Princess Chompers still clutched in one hand. Alexandra looked down at the sleeping child with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. She's amazing. She is. I don't know if I can do this. The mother thing, I spent so long focusing on the company, on being successful, that I never thought about kids, never wanted them. And now you're terrified. Completely. Good. That means you care. What if I'm not enough? What if I can't give her what she needs? Ethan reached over and took her hand. None of us knows if we're enough. We just show up every day and try our best. That's all any parent can do, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Emma stirred, blinked awake, looked confused for a moment about where she was. Then she saw Alexandra and smiled. I had a good dream. We were at the beach and there were dolphins and Princess Chompers could swim, even though T-Rexes probably can't swim. That sounds like a very good dream. Can we do this again? Can Alex come to the park with us again? Emma looked at Ethan, then at Alexandra, her eyes full of hope. If she wants to, sweetheart. I
love our life together.
Alexandra's voice
Me
was
too.
steady.
It's perfect.
Sure.
Just like
I
you.
really want to.
Come here.
Ethan went to work, dropped Emma at school, tried to maintain the routines that made life manageable. Alexandra ran her company, attended meetings, pretended everything was normal, while looking over her shoulder for the other shoe to drop. It dropped Thursday night. Ethan was reading Emma a bedtime story, something about a dragon who was afraid of heights, which Emma found hilarious when his phone rang. Alexandra. He stepped into the hallway to answer. He's here. Her voice was wrong, all the warmth from Sunday bar replaced by ice-cold terror. At my house, in the driveway. I went to get my car serviced this morning, and when they checked it, Ethan, there's a GPS tracker. Under the chassis. Professional grade. He's been following me for months. Call 911. I did. They're on their way. But Ethan, he knows I found it. He knows because I called the police from home, and he's been listening somehow. He's here right now, just sitting in his car watching my house. I'm coming. No, you have Emma. My mother's 5 minutes away. I'm coming. Lock the doors. Don't go near the windows. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He was there in 12, having called his mother on the way and given her the address, having asked her to come get Emma and not ask questions. Maureen must have heard something in his voice because she just said, I'll be there in 3 minutes and hung up. The scene at Alexandra's house looked surreal in the orange glow of streetlights. Marcus's Mercedes was parked in the driveway, blocking Alexandra's beam. Under the driver's side door was open, but the car was empty. No police yet. Their 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. Ethan pulled up behind the Mercedes, blocking it in, and got out of his car. The front door of Alexandra's house was closed, but he could see lights on inside. He called her cell. Where are you, bedroom? Door's locked. He knocked it for 10 minutes, and now I can't hear him anymore. That's worse. When I can't hear him, that's worse. Stay there. I'm coming in. The front door was unlocked. Ethan pushed it open and stepped into the foyer, every nerve screaming at him to turn around, to get back in his car, to call for backup that wasn't coming fast enough. The house was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic. Then he heard footsteps above him, slow and deliberate. A door handle turning. Alexandra's voice sharp with fear. "Get away from my door." Ethan took the stairs two at a time. The hallway was long doors on both sides, and at the end, Marcus stood outside what must have been Alexandra's bedroom. He had something in his hand, a screwdriver Ethan realized for taking the door off its hinges. Marcus turned when he heard Ethan, and something flickered across his face. Surprise. Calculation. Then rage. "You." He said it like a curse. "Always you. Step away from the door." Ethan's voice was steadier than he felt. "This is over. The police are coming." "Nothing is over. She's my wife. She needs to understand she's not your wife. And she understands perfectly. You're the one who can't accept reality." Marcus laughed a sound with no sanity in it. "Reality? Reality is that we belong together. Reality is that some stranger doesn't get to decide otherwise. I'm not deciding anything. She decided 18 months ago, and you've spent every day since then proving she made the right choice." Marcus moved then fast and unexpected, closing the distance between them before Ethan could react. The screwdriver came up, not quite a weapon, but not quite not, and Ethan did what his father had taught him years ago. When they'd worked construction one summer, he stepped inside the strike instead of away from it, getting close enough that Marcus's arm couldn't get leverage, and drove his shoulder into Marcus's chest. They went down hard, Marcus's back hitting the hallway floor with a crack that sounded like it hurt. The screwdriver skittered away. Ethan tried to pin him, but Marcus was bigger, stronger, and driven by something Ethan couldn't match, the absolute conviction that he was entitled to what he wanted. A fist caught Ethan in the temple, stars exploding across his vision. He rolled, tried to get his feet under him, and Marcus was on him again, hands around his throat, squeezing. "This is your fault." Marcus's face was inches away, spittle flying. "She was fine until you showed up. We were going to work things out. But you poisoned her against me." Ethan couldn't breathe. His vision was going gray at the edges. He scrabbled at Marcus's hands, trying to break the grip, and his fingers found the pressure point at the base of Marcus's thumb. He pressed hard, twisting, and the grip loosened enough for him to suck in air. Clayton had taught him that too, when someone's bigger and stronger, use their body against them. Find the weak spots. Make every move count. Ethan bucked his hips, rolling them over, getting on top. He pinned Marcus's arms with his knees and drew back his fist and stopped. Because hitting Marcus, no matter how satisfying it would feel, would make him look like the aggressor, would give Hardwick ammunition, would turn this into mutual combat instead of self-defense. So Ethan just held him there, breathing hard, until the sirens finally got loud enough to matter. The police arrived in force this time, 3 cars, 6 officers, no more excuses about family disputes or misunderstandings. They took Marcus into custody while he screamed about his rights and his father and how this was all a setup. They photographed the screwdriver, the damage to the door hinge, the red marks on Ethan's throat. They took statements that would take hours to complete. And through it all, Alexandra stayed in her bedroom until one of the female officers came upstairs and told her it was safe to come out. When she finally emerged, she looked smaller somehow, like the fight had taken something fundamental from her. She walked straight to Ethan and wrapped her arms around him without saying anything. He held her, feeling her shake, feeling his own delayed reaction starting to set in. They sat on Alexandra's couch while police moved through the house, documenting everything, building the case that would finally put Marcus Bennett somewhere he couldn't hurt anyone. Delilah arrived at midnight, grim-faced and efficient. She listened to their statements, made notes, and announced that this time Marcus wouldn't be walking out in 4 hours. Breaking and entering, assault, violation of a restraining order while under explicit court orders. The judge is going to throw the book at him. "You said that before." Alexander's voice was hollow. His father made phone calls and he walked. His father can't fix this. Not with a pattern, this established. Not with a witness who's a third party. Not with physical evidence of assault. Marcus Bennett is going to jail. For years. "Are you sure?" Delilah met her eyes. "As sure as I can be about anything in the legal system." "But yes, I'm sure." After the police left and the house was quiet, except for the hum of a crime scene that was no longer a crime scene, Alexandra turned to Ethan. "You could have been killed. He could have, but he didn't, because you were stupid enough to come charging in here alone." Ethan touched the bruises already forming on his throat. "Probably, but I'd do it again. Why? Why do you keep risking everything for me? Because he stopped searching for words that felt adequate and finding none. Because I love you. I know it's too soon to say that. I know we barely know each other. But standing out there wondering if you were safe, all I could think was that I couldn't lose you. Not now. Not when I'm just starting to understand what having you in my life means. Alexandra stared at him, tears finally spilling over. I love you too, and I'm terrified that loving you is going to destroy everything good in your life. Then we'll rebuild. Together. They fell asleep on the couch sometime around 3 in the morning, exhausted and bruised, and holding on to each other like the world might end if they let go. When Ethan's phone rang at 7, his mother calling to check on him, he woke to find Alexandra watching him with red-rimmed eyes. Marcus was arraigned this morning. No bail. Delilah just texted. He's being held at county jail pending trial. It's over. Maybe. Or maybe it's just beginning. But even as she said it, something in Alexandra's face had changed. Not peace exactly, but a kind of weary hope. The hope that comes after surviving something that should have broken you and finding you were still standing. Ethan checked his phone, saw 17 missed calls and 43 texts, most from his mother demanding updates. He called her back and explained, leaving out the worst parts, downplaying the violence, making it sound manageable, because mother's worried enough without fuel. When he hung up, Alexandra was in the kitchen making coffee with mechanical precision. Emma's going to have questions about why you came home so late, about the bruises. I'll tell her the truth, that sometimes adults have to help people even when it's hard. She's 6. She won't understand. She understands more than you think. Ethan accepted the coffee Alexandra handed him, their fingers touching briefly. She asked me something yesterday, after you left. She asked if you were going to be part of our family. What did you say? I said I hope so. If you want it to be, I want to be. But I don't know if I know how. If I can be what she needs. Nobody knows how until they're doing it. That's the secret of parenting. We're all just figuring it out as we go. Even you. Especially me. Alexandra sat down next to him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Delilah says the trial will probably be in 6 months. Marcus's lawyer will drag it out as long as possible. 6 months of waiting, wondering, living in this limbo. Then we live in it together. 6 months or 6 years, however long it takes. I'm not going anywhere. She turned to look at him. Really look, and Ethan saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Trust, fragile and new, but there. I believe you. 3 words. Simple as breathing, but they carried the weight of everything Alexandra had been through. Every reason she had to doubt, every wall she'd built to stay safe.
I love our life
She was
together.
choosing to believe
Me too.
anyway.
It's perfect.
Choosing
Just
to
like
trust.
you.
Choosing
Come here.
him. Outside the sky. Somewhere across the city, Marcus Bennett sat in a jail cell facing consequences he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Somewhere across town, Emma was waking up in her grandmother's guest room, probably demanding pancakes and asking about dinosaurs. And here in Alexandra's fortress of a house that had been violated but not conquered, 2 people who'd both learned the hard way that trust was dangerous were choosing to try anyway. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't even really an ending at all. But it was a beginning, and sometimes that was enough. The phone call from Delilah came at 7:30 Monday morning, 48 hours after Marcus's arrest. Ethan was making Emma breakfast scrambled eggs that were slightly too dry because he'd been distracted thinking about Alexandra's face when she'd said she loved him, when his phone buzzed across the counter. Bad news. Marcus was arraigned this morning. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. Trial date set for next week. They're fast-tracking it because of the assault. Next week, that's not enough time to prepare. It's plenty of time for them to muddy the waters. James Hardwick filed 3 motions this morning. He wants the GPS tracker, evidence excluded. Claims it was installed by someone else trying to frame Marcus. He wants Ethan's testimony limited because of bias. And he's requesting a psychological evaluation of Alexandra to determine if she's a credible witness. They're saying she's crazy. They're saying she's unreliable, emotionally unstable due to the stress of divorce. It's a common tactic and usually it doesn't work. But with Marcus's family connections, we need to be prepared for anything. What do we need to do? Fight back harder. I've hired Garrett Blackwood, a private investigator. He's going to dig into Marcus's past, find other victims, build a pattern we can't ignore. And I need you and Alexandra in my office this afternoon. We have work to do. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Delilah spread documents across her conference table like a general, planning a campaign, phone records, bank statements, security footage, medical reports from the night Alexandra had been hit. Garrett Blackwood joined them at two, a man in his mid-40s with gray-streaked hair and the careful movements of someone who'd learned to be invisible. Found something interesting. Marcus Bennett worked at a firm called Morrison and Shaw before joining Bennett and Associates. Left under murky circumstances in 2019. Took me 3 calls to find someone willing to talk, but I got a name. Vanessa Sterling. She filed a complaint with HR claiming Marcus stalked her after she declined to go out with him. What happened to the complaint bureau? Judge Richard Bennett made phone calls. Vanessa was encouraged to withdraw or face career consequences. She withdrew. Alexander's hands tightened on the table. He did this before, to someone else, and they protected him. They protected their son. But Vanessa might testify now, especially after seeing the news coverage. I reached out. She's thinking about it. The trial began on a Wednesday morning in late November. The courtroom was packed, journalists, courthouse regulars, and what looked like half of Tampa's legal community. Judge Margaret Sullivan presided with the same stern expression she'd worn during the restraining order hearing, but this time the stakes were criminal charges that could put Marcus away for a decade. James Hardwick opened with a performance that would have been impressive if it wasn't so calculated. He painted Marcus as a devoted husband, destroyed by his wife's ambition, a man who made mistakes born from love, who deserved compassion, not condemnation. He painted Alexandra as cold and calculating, a woman who'd weaponized the legal system against a man guilty only of loving her too much. And he painted Ethan as the interloper, the subordinate who'd seen opportunity in a vulnerable boss and seized it. The jury, 8 women, 4 men ranging from early 20s to late 60s, watched with expressions Ethan couldn't read. Were they buying it? Could they see through the manipulation? Delilah's opening was surgical. This case is about control. Marcus Bennett is a man who believes he owns his ex-wife. When she left him, he refused to accept it. When she filed for divorce, he refused to respect it. When she got a restraining order, he violated it. And when she tried to move on with her life, he broke into her home and assaulted a witness. This isn't love. This is obsession. An obsession, when left unchecked, becomes dangerous. The prosecution called Alexandra first. She took the stand wearing a charcoal suit, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the CEO. But when Delilah asked her to describe her marriage, something in Alexandra's facade cracked, and what came out was raw. The first year was good. Maybe the first 2 years. Then slowly, so slowly I didn't notice at first, things changed. He wanted to know where I was going, who I was meeting, what we discussed. He'd check my phone when I was in the shower, read my emails when I was asleep, tell me certain friends were bad influences, certain family members didn't understand us. One by one, he isolated me from everyone who might have noticed what was happening. What was happening? I was disappearing. The person I'd been confident, decisive, independent, was being erased piece by piece, replaced with someone smaller. Someone who checked with her husband before speaking. Someone who apologized for taking up space. When did the physical abuse start? Year 7. We were at a client dinner. I spent 20 minutes talking to a potential investor, a man, about a deal we were pursuing. On the drive home, Marcus told me I'd embarrassed him, made him look weak. When we got home, she stopped, took a breath. He slapped me, hard enough that my ear rang for 2 days. Then he cried and apologized and promised it would never happen again. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because admitting what he was would mean admitting what I'd become. Hardwick's cross-examination was vicious. He questioned every detail, implied Alexandra was exaggerating or fabricating, suggested the slap was mutual combat or self-defense. Alexandra held her ground, but Ethan could see the toll it took, the way her hands shook when she gripped the witness box, the tremor in her voice when describing the worst moments. Vanessa Sterling testified on Thursday, day 2 of the trial. She was 30, polished, nervous. Her voice barely rose above a whisper as she described Marcus's behavior in 2019, the unwanted attention, the appearances at her gym and grocery store, the late-night phone calls from blocked numbers. When Delilah asked why she'd withdrawn her complaint, Vanessa's answer was devastating. Because I was 26 and scared, and Judge Bennett's office called my boss and suggested my career would benefit from not pursuing baseless accusations against a colleague's son. So I withdrew, and I left the firm 3 months later because I couldn't stand seeing Marcus in the halls looking at me like he'd won. Hardwick tried to discredit her, suggested she was a disgruntled former employee seeking attention, implied her memory might be faulty after 6 years. But the damage was done. The jury had seen a pattern. 2 women, different years, same behavior. Ethan testified on Friday, day 3. Delilah took him through the timeline methodically, the beach encounter, the threatening text the night Marcus broke in. When she asked him to describe finding Marcus outside Alexandra's bedroom, Ethan focused on the details. The screwdriver in Marcus's hand, the door hinge already loosened, the look in Marcus's eyes that said he'd crossed a line and didn't care. Hardwick came at him differently than he had during the restraining order hearing. This time he didn't imply romantic motivation. He questioned judgment. "Mr. Carter, you have a 6-year-old daughter, correct?" "Yes." "And on the night in question, you left her with your mother to rush to Ms. Bennett's home?" "Yes." "Knowing there was a dangerous situation, knowing the police were already called, knowing you could be injured or killed?" "Yes." "That seems reckless for a single father." "It would have been reckless to do nothing." "My daughter needs to learn that adults help people in danger, even when it's hard, even when it's scary." Hardwick paused, seeming to recalibrate. "You care deeply for Ms. Bennett." "I do. Love her even." "Yes. And you do anything to protect her. Anything legal and right, yes. Including perhaps exaggerating what you saw that night." "I didn't exaggerate. I told the truth as you perceived it. But perception can be colored by emotion, can it?" Ethan met Hardwick's eyes. "I'm an analyst. I spend my days dealing with objective data. I know the difference between perception and fact. What I saw that night was fact. Marcus Bennett was removing the door to Alexandra's bedroom. He had a tool in his hand. He attacked me when I intervened. Those are facts, not perceptions." Monday of the second week brought Marcus to the stand, and Ethan watched a masterclass in manipulation. Marcus wore a gray suit that made him look humble, spoke with a voice that broke at strategic moments, presented himself as a man who'd lost everything and just wanted understanding. "I love my wife. I still love her. Yes, I made mistakes. I see that now. The marriage was falling apart, and instead of accepting it with grace, I tried to hold on too tightly. I went to her house that night not to hurt anyone, but to apologize. To finally say the things I should have said 18 months ago. When Mr. Carter arrived, I felt threatened, defensive. I reacted poorly. Hardwick guided him through a narrative that made every action seem understandable, every choice seem reasonable. The GPS tracker Marcus claimed he'd been worried about Alexandra's safety and wanted to make sure she was okay. The courthouse confrontation, a misunderstanding, the broken window, an accident when he knocked too hard in frustration. By the time Hardwick finished, some of the jury members looked almost sympathetic. Ethan felt his stomach sink. This was what Marcus
I
did
love
when
our life
people
together.
got what they'd
Me
seen.
too. It's
With
perfect.
their own eyes,
Just
made
like
abuse
you.
sound like love
Come
gone
here.
wrong. Then Delilah stood up for cross-examination. "Mr. Bennett, you said you loved your wife. Do you still consider her your wife, ex-wife?" "Legally. But emotionally, yes or no, please?" "Yes." "And when someone you love tells you to leave them alone, what do you do?" "I try to understand why. Try to fix whatever went wrong. Even if they've filed for divorce, marriage vows are for life. Even if they've gotten a restraining order. Sometimes people don't know what they truly want. Even if they've moved on with someone else." Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, fury flashing across his face before he controlled it. "She hasn't moved on. She's confused. That man Carter, he's taken advantage of her vulnerability. By helping her when she called for help, by inserting himself where he doesn't belong." Delilah let that answer hang in the air. "Mr. Bennett, is it fair to say you believe Alexandra belongs to you?" "She's my wife, ex-wife. That doesn't change 7 years of marriage. It changes everything. That's what divorce means, that she doesn't belong to you anymore, that she never belonged to you in the first place." Marcus's hands clenched on the witness box. "You don't understand. What you had was control. What you lost was that control. And you've spent 18 months trying to take it back." "That's not true." "Then why did you install GPS tracking on her car for her safety? Why did you appear at places where she was present 47 times? Coincidence. Tampa is a small city. Why did you email her board members suggesting she was mentally unstable, out of concern? Why did you break into her home to apologize? With a screwdriver to remove the lock on her bedroom door, Marcus opened his mouth closed, it opened it again. For the first time since taking the stand, he looked trapped. I was frustrated. I wasn't thinking clearly. Were you thinking clearly when you put your hands around Mr. Carter's throat? He attacked me first. Multiple witnesses, including police who responded, say otherwise. The crime scene photos showed defensive wounds on Mr. Carter and offensive wounds on you. The screwdriver was found 10 feet from where the assault occurred, exactly where Mr. Carter said you dropped it. Marcus's face had gone red. This is a setup, all of it. She turned everyone against me, made me look like a monster. But I'm not. I'm just a man who loved too much. Love doesn't break into houses. Love doesn't stalk. Love doesn't assault. What you're describing isn't love. Mr. Bennett, it's ownership. And Alexandra Bennett is not your property. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Sullivan gabbled for order. Marcus sat rigid in the witness box, breathing hard. The careful facade finally cracked. Delilah wasn't finished. Mr. Bennett, are you currently receiving psychological treatment? I started therapy after the arrest to understand my behaviors better. How many sessions have you attended? 5. In 3 weeks. That's quite intensive. Did your attorney suggest this might help your case objection? Hardwick was on his feet. Counsel is implying my client's treatment isn't genuine. Is it not 5 sessions starting exactly when he was arrested presented to this court as evidence of rehabilitation? Judge Sullivan leaned forward. I'll allow it. Mr. Bennett answered the question. My attorney mentioned it might demonstrate my commitment to change, but I wanted help regardless. What does your therapist say about your behavior toward your ex-wife? That I have attachment issues, that I struggle with rejection, that I need to work on boundaries. And yet here you are still referring to her as your wife, still unable to accept that she left you, still convinced she belongs with you. Marcus's jaw worked. Some things are worth fighting for, not people. People aren't possessions to fight for. They're individuals with autonomy and choice. And Alexandra chose to leave you. That's her right. She chose wrong. The words came out harsh, definitive, and the entire courtroom went silent. Delilah had been steering Marcus toward this moment, getting him comfortable, then agitated, then honest. And in that honesty, he'd revealed exactly what he was. No further questions, Your Honor. The trial recessed for the day. Ethan found Alexandra in the hallway looking shaken. He said it, out loud, in front of everyone. He said, I chose wrong. Like you're a child who needs his guidance, like your choices need his approval. For 7 years, that's what I believed. That I needed his approval, his permission, his validation. Alexandra turned to face Ethan. Hearing him say it in court, hearing how insane it sounds, I finally understand how much he stole from me. Not just time, not just peace, but the fundamental belief that my choices mattered, that I could trust my own judgment. You can, you do. Look at what you've built. Look at who you are, who I am now. Because I finally chose right. I chose to leave. I chose to file charges. I chose. She stopped, something shifting in her expression. I chose you. The words hung between them, weighted with everything they'd been through. Best choice you ever made. Ethan meant it as lightness, as relief from the tension, but Alexandra's eyes filled with tears. I think it might be. Tuesday brought Garrett Blackwood's findings. He'd been thorough, compiling evidence that painted a picture of Marcus Bennett as someone who'd been skating by on privilege his entire life. A DUI at 19 that disappeared from records. An assault charge in college that was dropped after Judge Bennett intervened. 3 women from Marcus's past who'd experienced similar behavior to what Alexandra described. None had filed formal complaints because they'd known about the Bennett family's reach. But the evidence that changed everything came from Alexandra's own home. Garrett had done a thorough sweep after the break-in, looking for anything Marcus might have left behind. What he found were 3 hidden cameras professionally installed, small enough to be invisible unless you knew where to look. One in the living room disguised as part of a decorative lamp, one in the kitchen built into a wall clock, one in the bedroom tucked inside a picture frame Marcus had given Alexandra for their 5th anniversary. The cameras had been recording for 4 months. 217 hours of footage showing Alexandra's private life, phone calls with lawyers, conversations with friends, moments alone when she cried in her own home, thinking no one could see. But they also captured audio from when Marcus called his brother from outside Alexandra's house, thinking the cameras only recorded video. The conversation was damning. If she doesn't come back willingly, I'll have to make her understand. That Carter guy is a problem, but problems can be solved. Dad knows people. We can make things complicated for him. Custody issues, maybe. Someone files a complaint about his parenting. Make him too busy dealing with his own mess to interfere with mine. Delilah played the recording in court Wednesday morning. The jury listened with expressions that shifted from shock to disgust. Marcus sat frozen, his face draining of color, as his own voice described plans to weaponize the legal system against Ethan and Emma. When the recording ended, Delilah addressed the court. This is who Marcus Bennett is when he thinks no one's listening. Not the contrite man seeking forgiveness. Not the devoted husband wanting reconciliation. But someone willing to threaten a 6-year-old child to maintain control over a woman who dared to leave him. Hardwick objected, arguing the recording might not be admissible, but Judge Sullivan overruled him. The cameras were in Alexandra's home recording her private space. Any audio captured was evidence of surveillance and intimidation. Garrett also presented financial records showing Marcus had transferred $340,000 from joint accounts in the weeks before Alexandra filed for divorce. The money had been funneled through a shell corporation, RB Holdings LLC, and hidden from the divorce proceedings. It was financial abuse on top of everything else. The prosecution rested Wednesday afternoon. Hardwick called character witnesses for Marcus' colleagues who described him as professional friends who said he'd seemed devoted to his wife, a therapist who testified about his commitment to treatment. But after the recording, after the cameras, after Marcus's own words on the stand, it felt like trying to bail water from a sinking ship. Closing arguments came Thursday morning. Hardwick gave it everything he had, arguing that Marcus was a flawed man who'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to lose years of his life. That love sometimes looked like obsession. That the prosecution had painted him as a monster when he was simply human. Delilah's closing was devastating. Marcus Bennett is not on trial for being a bad husband. He's on trial for breaking into a home, for assaulting a witness, for violating a restraining order under explicit court orders not to contact his ex-wife. These aren't mistakes. These are crimes committed by a man who refuses to accept that women have the right to leave, the right to say no, the right to build lives that don't include him. She paused, letting the words sink in. You've heard evidence of a pattern spanning years. You've heard from 2 women who experienced similar behavior. You've seen cameras hidden in a woman's bedroom. You've listened to recordings of Marcus Bennett planning to weaponize a 6-year-old child to hurt her father. This isn't love. This isn't even obsession. This is malice. This is control. And if we don't stop it here, if we don't say clearly that this behavior has consequences, then what message are we sending to every person trapped in a relationship with someone who believes ownership is love? The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Ethan spent most of that time in a small conference room with Alexandra, neither of them able to eat or focus on anything except the clock on the wall. Emma was with his parents, probably asking why Daddy seemed so distracted lately. He tried to explain simplified, sanitized, but 6-year-olds had a way of seeing through obfuscation. Is the bad man going to jail? Emma had asked that morning. I hope so, sweetheart. Me too. Because Alex is family now, and families protect each other. The verdict came back at 6:17 Thursday evening. The jury filed in looking exhausted. Judge Sullivan asked if they'd reached a decision. We have your honor. The forewoman was a woman in her 50s, a teacher according to the jury selection notes. She handed the paper to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Judge Sullivan read it without expression, then looked at Marcus. On the charge of breaking and entering, how do you find guilty? On the charge of assault in the 2nd degree, guilty. On the charge of violation of a restraining order, guilty. On the charge of stalking, guilty. On the charge of unlawful surveillance, guilty. On the charge of financial abuse during divorce proceedings, guilty. Marcus remained motionless, but Ethan saw his father, Judge Richard Bennett, sitting in the gallery, close his eyes. All the power, all the connections, all the phone calls hadn't been enough this time. Sentencing would come in 2 weeks. Based on the charges, Marcus was facing 10 to 13 years. Delilah explained this in her office afterward, Alexandra and Ethan sitting across from her desk like students receiving grades. The judge will consider mitigating factors: his lack of prior record, his family's standing, his supposed commitment to therapy. But with 6 guilty verdicts and clear evidence of escalation, I'd be shocked if he gets less than 8 years. More likely 10, and the restraining order becomes permanent. Even after he serves his time, he's prohibited from contacting either of you for life. Violation means automatic return to prison. Alexandra's hands were shaking. It's really over. The legal part is. The healing part takes longer. How long? Delilah's smile was kind. However long it takes. There's no timeline on recovery from trauma. You work through it at your own pace. She glanced at Ethan. Both of you have each other, and from what I've seen, that's worth more than any verdict. The months that followed were measured in small victories. Alexandra started therapy with Dr. Jennifer Walsh twice a week. The nightmares came less frequently. The hypervigilance faded. Emma asked if Alex could come to her school play, and Alexandra said yes, and sat in the audience crying happy tears when Emma waved from the stage. Ethan and Alexandra made their relationship official at work, filing HR documentation, being transparent in ways that protected them both. Most colleagues had figured it out anyway. 3 months after the verdict, on a quiet Sunday afternoon at Ethan's apartment, Emma asked the question that had been building. Is Alex my mom now? Alexandra, who'd been helping Emma with a dinosaur puzzle, froze. Ethan felt his heart clench. They'd known this was coming, but hadn't prepared an answer. Not exactly sweetheart. Alex is your father's partner, and your friend, and someone who cares about you very much. Alexandra's voice was gentle but steady. But being a mom is complicated. Your biological mom is Sienna, even though she doesn't see you very much. And I'm someone who loves you and wants to be part of your life, but I don't want to replace anyone. Does that make sense? Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to important questions. So you're like a bonus person, not instead of extra. Exactly. Extra. I like extra. Can I call you Alex, Mom? If you want to. Emma nodded, satisfied, and went back to her puzzle. After she'd gone to bed, Alexandra collapsed on the couch. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Nobody knows. We're all just hoping we don't mess it up too badly. What if I mess her up, then we figure it out. Together. That's what healing means, not being perfect, just being honest and trying. 6 months after the trial, in early May, when Florida's heat was building but not yet oppressive, Ethan suggested they go to the beach. Not any beach, Clearwater, where everything had started. His parents came too. They'd become quietly supportive of Alexandra, welcoming her into the family with the same steady acceptance they'd shown Ethan his whole life. They set up chairs and umbrellas while Emma ran toward the water with Princess Chompers shrieking with joy. Ethan and Alexandra walked along the shoreline, letting waves wash over their feet. 6 months ago, this beach had been the site of fear and lies and a desperate gambit. Now it felt like home. I stood right here. Alexandra stopped at the spot, thinking about swimming out until I couldn't see land anymore, until nothing could reach me. What stopped you? Knowing it wouldn't help. You can't outrun trauma. The only way through is through, and have you gotten through? Alexandra turned to look at him. Getting there. Some days are hard, but most days now I wake up and don't check the security cameras first thing. I sleep through the night. I go to the grocery store without looking over my shoulder. She reached for his hand. And I have you. That makes everything easier. Ethan had been carrying the ring in his pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. He'd chosen a sapphire because it matched her eyes and diamonds felt too obvious. Simple band, elegant stone commitment without ostentation. This was the moment, the beach where they'd met, the sun turning the water gold, Emma building sandcastles with his parents 50 yards away. He pulled the ring from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Alexandra's eyes widened, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. 6 months ago, I was going through the motions. Taking care of Emma, doing my job, existing, but not living. Then I met you, scared and strong and fighting battles most people would have surrendered to. His throat tightened, but he pushed through. You taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love, even when you know it might cost you everything. Alexandra Bennett, you're the strongest, smartest, most remarkable person I've ever known. You survived hell and still have the capacity to love, to trust, to hope. He opened the ring box. If you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love doesn't have to be control. That partnership means choosing each other freely every single day. That healing is possible and happiness is real, and you deserve every good thing this world has to offer. Will you marry me? Alexandra was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling too. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly and stood to kiss her. Around them, the beach continued its rhythm, waves rolling in and out eternal. But in this moment, everything else fell away. Emma's shriek carried across the sand. Did he ask? Did she say yes? She was running toward them, Princess Chompers bouncing Maureen and Clayton, following at a more dignified pace. Emma crashed into their legs, hugging them both. Are we a real family now? We were always a real family. But yes, now it's official. Alexandra knelt to Emma's level. What do you think? Should I marry your dad? Yes, but only if I can help plan the wedding and Princess Chompers gets to come. Deal. They spent the rest of the afternoon on the beach building sandcastles, swimming in water, still cool despite the May warmth, eating sandwiches that got gritty with sand, but tasted perfect anyway. As the sun started to set, they packed up. Emma fell asleep in the car on the way home, exhausted and happy, clutching Princess Chompers. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand holding Alexandra's. People talk about closure like it's a door you walk through and everything's different on the other side. But healing isn't linear. It's not a destination. It's a choice you make every morning to get up, to try to believe that today might be better than yesterday. Alexandra squeezed his hand. Healing isn't forgetting the past. It's refusing to let the past control the future. Exactly. They drove through Tampa as the streetlights blinked on, heading home. Not to his apartment or hers, but to the life they were building together, imperfect, complicated, real. Emma slept in the back seat, dreaming of dinosaurs and beaches and families that chose each other. The ring on Alexandra's finger caught the light, a promise made and accepted. Somewhere across the city, Marcus Bennett sat in a prison cell with 8 years left to serve. Somewhere in California, Sienna was probably working on her research, having chosen ambition over motherhood and never looking back. But here in this car, 3 people who'd been broken in different ways had found a way to fit together. It wasn't a fairy tale. Life never was. There would be hard days ahead, moments when the past tried to claw its way back, when fear whispered that happiness was temporary, when healing felt impossible. But they would face those days together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.